This is Opinionated with Danica to Giorgio.
Hello and welcome to the show. Coming up tonight, a bunch of angry misfits. Thousands of kids wagged school to protest against Pauline Hanson. And I've got to say, it was quite a spectacle. News24 host James McPherson has a brilliant editorial lined up for you. Climate madness as the fifth heatwave of the year hits Britain. Not even solar panels are working. Now, this is truly another warning for Australia. And Melon Gate and the Japanese melons, the Prime Minister's latest bizarre excuse for being a melon himself. That's coming up later on in the debrief. But first tonight, forget reading, writing, maths, learning, educational outcomes. Who cares about all of that when you're a teenage kid and your number one worry in life is Pauline Hanson? Kids around the country skipped school yesterday to protest against the One Nation leader. And I've got to say, it looked like a bunch of misfits, swearing, yelling abuse. Even News24 reporter Giorgio had her microphone stolen.
As you can see, there's so many students out here protesting today. Similar sentiment to where Kaiser is. Can you go? No, give it back. Sorry. Give it back. 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 Let it go. What happened? She stole my microphone. It's in her bag.
Yeah, and this is the future of our country. Here's News24 host James McPherson.
Well, thousands of kids wagged school yesterday to protest One Nation leader Pauline Hanson.
This girl's message was clear, even if the spelling wasn't.
And you're racist there as well.
Spelling's overrated. Ask anyone on Skid Row. The kids said they protested Pauline Hanson because, well, she's a bigot.
She's a racist?
Sexist. All right. Anti-working class bigot.
The kids also protested because they believed that a day chanting inane slogans in the CBD would be much more fun than sitting in a classroom learning algebra. And besides, their respectful relationships teacher, Indigo Wokebottom, had assured them that LGBTQ was about all the algebra they'd ever need. Students converged on capital cities to demand a gentler, kinder, more tolerant form of political discourse.
Hanson! Hanson!
They also gave voice to their concerns that Pauline Hanson lacked empathy.
When I say Hanson, you say
Many of the students said they were angry at Pauline Hanson's proposed cuts to immigration. After all, their public school teacher, Barry Class-Struggle, had told them cutting immigration was racist, and the kids knew he was telling the truth when he posted it on TikTok. And so, utilising all the skills they'd learned in the public education system, the kids offered an alternative vision for Australia's future.
Off Nazis! Am I the Nazi? Off Nazis! Am I the Nazi?
Now, at this point, I know what you're thinking, because I'm thinking it too. Actually, that's not what I was thinking. When asked to explain exactly why they hated Pauline Hanson, the kids just repeated what their social studies teacher, Trotsky McRedpants, had told them last semester.
Just how she acts and stuff. Like, as my sign says, she is racist, sexist, and a Nazi. And just no one really wants her as the president.
One of the great achievements of modern education is that we've managed to produce teenagers who can identify 37 varieties of oppression and 72 genders, but who struggle to make even a single coherent point. Have a listen to this Channel 7 reporter who tried his best to put a positive spin on the protests.
Pauline Hanson inspiring a love of politics in the next generation.
I don't think the kids were protesting because they love politics. I think the kids were keen to get out of math class, and frankly, I can't blame them. If my options at 14 had been quadratic equations or standing in the CBD shouting abuse while being filmed for television, I'd probably have needed a pretty compelling argument for maths class as well. And I did have a compelling argument. Mum, she would have grounded me for a month if I'd carried on like these kids, which is why I never grew up to be a left-wing radical. So, thanks, Mum. I owe you one.
You know, James raises a good point. Where are the parents in all of this? And my concern is that one day those kids will enter the workforce. God help us all. Well, a communist wave is sweeping through America and it should concern all of us. Far-left Democrat candidate Abdul El-Sayed won the Senate primary in Michigan last week, backed by the likes of the very anti-American streamer Hassan Piker. Now, amid the rise of socialism, the Democrats are clearly facing an internal battle to figure out what exactly it stands for. But on the other side of politics, the Republicans certainly aren't immune from the chaos either. News24 Washington correspondent Jonathan Kersley breaks down what all of this means for the upcoming midterm elections.
The clock is running down to the November midterm election and Democrats are having an identity crisis. They're a side locked in a battle over whether to move further to the left or sit somewhere in the middle. The tight results in the Michigan Senate primary race that progressive Abdul El-Sayed won and the Wisconsin governor's race where left candidate Francesca Hong lost to a moderate show this party is still firmly split, particularly in crucial states. And that's a problem, a big one. But there's a lot more riding on this November's elections for the president and Republicans. The war in Iran will likely still dominate at a time when many Americans want politicians focused on handling the economy, and voters generally cast their ballots based on their way of life and what they want, not necessarily foreign policy. Donald Trump is obviously not on the ballot, but the balance of power on the Hill is. If Republicans lose the House and the Senate, it would be a disaster. It would make the final 2 years of President 47 a lame duck presidency, putting Donald Trump in a position he does not like nor want to be in. And then come the real questions over what happens next. How the Republicans go could also help decide who emerges as a frontrunner for the presidential race in 2028. History does tell us the party of a sitting president tends to lose furniture at midterms, but cast your minds back to 2022 and the expectant red wave that did not come. That result kept Joe Biden in the mindset he should still run in 2024 and could beat Donald Trump. Had the wave rolled in, it would likely be an entirely different story being told now. So what is all this? It's a cautionary tale of the polls and the expectations, but also a timely reminder of the importance of off-year elections and how they reshape not only power on the Hill in Washington, D.C., but the way forward for presidents. And in the now 251st year of the grand United States of America, these midterms become a battle for one party's identity and a path forward. And for the man in the White House, it's a battle for power and legacy.
Yeah, it's certainly shaping up to be an interesting midterms, isn't it? And I think watch this space very closely. Now, the coalition is tipped to announce its long-awaited net overseas migration target at around 180,000 a year to reduce the strain on housing demand.
The shortfall between number of houses built and the number of people coming in is 350 to 400,000, about that.
Now, look, it certainly doesn't seem like that figure of 180,000 has been ticked off by the whole party. But even if it was, it's not at all ambitious enough. When you consider 1.3 million plus have come into this country since Labor was first elected, record on record, year after year. And at the same time, the coalition has pledged to work with One Nation to ban Australian citizens linked to overseas terror groups from returning. Jordan Abu Zaid from the Institute of Public Affairs has this editorial.
One Nation is putting an ambitious new bill to Parliament. It would stop Australian citizens with links to overseas terrorist groups from returning home. And the coalition have backed it. It's refreshing to see parties of the right working together to make this country better. But it's worth saying out loud why a law like this is necessary at all. Let's start with what this country actually is. Australia is the people. It's not the dirt or the land, beautiful as it is. It's not the buildings. Obviously, Australia is the men and women who live here, who built the country. The country is the quiet men and women who go about their lives providing for themselves and their families, building Australia in the process. The country is you. Of course, the country is changing, and for the worse. Anyone paying attention can see that. People don't want the country to change in the way that it is. They want to be able to afford good homes, to have good jobs, and to live in communities with people that think like them, with people that love Australia. But shockingly, for decades, we have brought in people who feel very differently about our way of life. There's no better example than Bondi, the worst terror attack in our country, in which Sajid Akram and his son, Naveed Akram, allegedly shot 11 men, 3 women, and a 10-year-old girl dead, targeting a Hanukkah celebration on Australia's most famous beach. Sajid Akram was an Indian national. Why did we let someone like that into the country? His son, Naveed Akram, was born here. He's an Australian on paper, but in my view, he's not an Australian in his heart. I don't think someone who would allegedly do that to the country is one of us. If people hate the country so much that they want to break it, I'm not sure I want them here. Look at what this One Nation legislation will do. I'd encourage you to look carefully at who votes no to stopping terrorists coming in.
That is a very good point, and I think we can all guess who won't be voting for it. And I must admit, it is great to see the Coalition and One Nation actually on a unity ticket on what is such an important moment in Australia. Well, the 5th heatwave of the year is about to hit Britain, but guess what? Not even solar panels are working. You heard that correct. The green dream is such a con, and it's forcing Brits to pay hundreds of millions of pounds more for energy. Writer and broadcaster Esther Kraku says the UK is being forced to import power from Europe just to survive.
Many moons ago, I did a panel show on Channel 5 with Zach Polanski, back when he was running to be the leader of the Green Party. And he was a perfectly polite and charming man, but he was also as dim as a cave. When we got into talking about energy prices, he said he didn't know why we let gas set the marginal price for electricity in this country, and that when he became Prime Minister, he'd make it wind. I was genuinely stunned into silence. Gas sets the price because gas is what's actually there when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. But what worried me wasn't that he wouldn't even concede my point. It's that he isn't far off the rest of our politicians in Westminster. We spent £439 million importing power from Europe in May alone. That's the highest monthly bill ever recorded outside the Ukraine energy crisis. And the greatest irony, heat waves come with high pressure, and high pressure means low wind. So the wind farms underperform exactly when everyone's reaching for the air conditioning. Solar panels are rated at 25 degrees in a laboratory and run up to a fifth below that in real summer sun. So in Britain, we have wind farms that don't work in low wind and solar farms that can't handle warm weather. Someone fire the engineers. Unfortunately, Ed Miliband, who is our most recent energy secretary, isn't solely responsible for this, but he has done his fair bit of damage. This man has never had a proper job. He left Oxford University in 1992, started writing speeches for Harriet Harman in 1993, got parachuted into Gordon Brown's special advisory role, and then he became an MP for the safe seat of Doncaster North in 2005. And you would think that he would actually receive a punishment for being so terrible at designing Britain's energy policy. But no, he's been promoted to the Foreign Office. The new Energy Secretary is another busybody you haven't heard of, Mieta van Boele, who reckons the climate crisis is a crisis of capitalism. Well, that's awkward, isn't it, given it's the capitalists across the channel keeping us supplied and charging us handsomely for the convenience. Turns out policy is easy when somebody else pays for getting it wrong.
I mean, it's the clown show in charge. And as we know, it is the same here in Australia. There is absolutely no thought on how to keep the lights on, or even to critically shore up our baseload power. The West is seriously sleepwalking into an energy disaster. And on that note, Chris Bowen's frequent flyer miles to spruik the climate agenda are really something to behold. The Energy Minister has charged you more than $345,000 to travel around the world to promote his net zero ambitions. In fact, the climate change champ spent an average of $7,500 a day on international travel across 46 days abroad. Here's the Australian's Environment Editor, Graham Lloyd.
Climate Change Minister Chris Bowen has sloped taxpayers more than $345,000 to travel the world and spruik his net zero ambitions. To cut global warming, Mr Bowen has flown the equivalent distance of 4 times around the world, entourage in tow. Much of the travel was to spruik Australia's unsuccessful bid to host this year's climate change conference that will now be held in Turkey. But Mr. Bowen's travel costs are only the tip of the iceberg for what was spent on the failed diplomatic push to win international attention and support for the Albanese government. And those funds are only the tip of a mountain of money being spent by the federal and state governments in the name of climate change action. The renewable energy rollout may have stalled, but Mr. Bowen highlights electric cars and home batteries as proof the net zero push is working. In truth, billions of dollars are being spent by taxpayers on these schemes that are amongst the most expensive ways to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. This week, taxpayers agreed to subsidise electricity supplies for the Tomago aluminium smelter to the tune of $2.5 billion. The common theme is big government, and the evidence is it's getting bigger. Many of the new public service positions are there to make sure everybody else is doing what they're told. By the end of 2027, the total number of federal government staff in regulatory roles will be more than 110,000. Leading the way, naturally, is the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. The number of green tape monitors will soon double the number that were there in 2023 at a cost of more than $1 billion a year. And that's before the additional air miles are even counted. With news this week that coral cover on the Great Barrier Reef is as high as it's been in more than 40 years, it's time to take stock. The government fetish for killing nature to save it costs money that can be better spent on something else.
Yeah, when you think about it, Chris Bowen's got the best job in the country, part-time energy minister and trotting around the world on your dime. Stay with us. Coming up after the break, the debrief. The PM has doubled down on those Japanese melon comments. I'll play you what he said today and why he still doesn't get it. Plus, can we really call it Melongate? Wordsmith Kel Richards unpacks the term next. Welcome back. Let's talk about melons.
Got a couple of melons.
She brought two.
She brought two, as you do.
She just came in looking like Pamela Anderson.
Oh dear, Albo does find himself in a bit of a rind now. But can we really call this whole sorry saga Melongate? Wordsmith and broadcaster Kel Richards unpacks the term.
The Watergate complex is a group of 6 buildings in Washington, D.C. In 1972, the Watergate office building became the scene of the Watergate scandal. A group of burglars was unofficially and off the books, employed by a group called the Committee to Re-elect the President, the CREEP. Yes, it really did spell creep. On June 17, 1972, these operatives were caught burglarising and planting listening devices in the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate office building. Now, the corruption scandal built and built over months and eventually engulfed President Richard Nixon, whose re-election they had been conniving at. And he finally resigned in disgrace when it became apparent that he had, at the very least, been involved in attempts to cover up the scandal. Now, one result was the terminal ending of the word Watergate, the little gate bit at the end, was adopted as a way to label any corruption scandal that broke out. And this gave newspapers headline words such as Iran-gate, Dallas-gate, Hollywood-gate, Korea-gate, and others. So, what about this new one, Melongate? Well, I have to say it is completely and totally wrong from every angle. If the gate suffix is going to be added to a word, usually by lazy journalists, then just like the original Watergate, it must refer to some sort of corruption, criminal or financial or political corruption. Does the Melon affair fit that? No, of course not. It simply displays a serious failure of good judgment. In fact, Anthony Albanese showed remarkably poor judgment, not just once, but 3 times in a row. First, when he decided to do this podcast with this particular podcaster. Second, when he abandoned his dignity and sank down to her level of juvenile sniggering like a 15-year-old. And third, when he decided to pretend it never happened, nothing to see here. What we saw with our own eyes, we didn't really see. With his now notorious melon gesture. Now, that's a repeated failure of judgment over and over again. So poor, we have to give it a mark of S for stupid. I think I've met gumtrees that made better judgments than that. So, no corruption. That means we can't call the melon affair Melongate. So what can we call it then? How about Melonhead?
And now it is time for the debrief. And look, I have actually been scratching my melon, wondering why it is that the Prime Minister won't just admit when he's got it so very wrong. Now, I will let the Prime Minister explain in his own words about how he could not possibly be held responsible for the comments and hand gestures he made about Japanese PM's Sanae Takeachi's melons.
When I give interviews, anyone who has sat down with me, and there's a bit of footage of me doing interviews sitting on chairs, will see that I don't do them with my arms crossed. And so certainly as the interpretation that some have put on this is simply not correct.
Right. So let's just break this down. The Prime Minister for the first time has faced questions in Canberra over his melons comments. And he now says because he doesn't sit in interviews with his arms crossed, that his hand gestures at the time of the Bush Deep podcast have been totally misconstrued. Now, I'm no Rhodes Scholar, but I certainly didn't come down in the last shower, and neither did you. We know exactly what those hand gestures meant. He was then asked by journalists if he should have intervened when Nikki Osborne, the host of the podcast, compared the Japanese Prime Minister to Pamela Anderson. And at that point, Albo kept digging a hole.
If you have a look at the discussion that was occurring at some stages, two people are talking at once in a podcast with the comedian. I reiterate the fact that the interpretation that some have put on it was not correct. If you look at any of the interviews that I've done, I'm responsible for my words, and I note that of all the words that have been written on this, none of my words have been criticised. None.
No, he still doesn't get it, does he? And then when asked by journalists to reflect on whether it was appropriate for the Prime Minister of Australia to appear on a podcast of that nature, especially one called Bush Deep, well, the wheels really fell off.
I do a range of interviews. I've done across a range of, you can look at these things in hindsight, but I do a range of interviews, including, one with Aussie Man Reviews, who does puts words into his videos for animals that are engaging with each other. We have in modern media, in modern media I talk to a range of people.
Look, I don't know what he's on about, and I don't think he knows either. The fact is, the melon saga isn't going away because the Prime Minister is doing everything to not make it go away. He hasn't said sorry. He hasn't promised to speak to the Japanese leader on the phone or in person to say sorry. And now the crappy excuses about, oh, well, look, I don't have my arms folded in interviews, so it's all been misconstrued, and that his hand gestures juggling melons in front of his chest and laughing about Pamela Anderson was all just, everything but nothing to do with breasts.
Got a couple of melons.
She brought two.
She brought two, as you do.
She just came in looking like Pamela Anderson.
Please, why can't Albo just say, yep, I get it, I was wrong, I made a mistake, I am sorry, and move on? Now, look, there's obviously a perception in politics that when you admit to being wrong, it is worse than burying your head in the sand, but I actually think that voters are more likely to respond positively when a leader brings themselves back to a human level, not a robot reading lines at a press conference, and admits fault when it is abundantly clear that they have stuffed up. So why won't the Prime Minister admit when he is wrong? Well, all I can put it down to is that he's a melon. That's all we've got time for tonight. James Morrow is up next with the US report. Good night.